What caused this rant is we are finding out more information now about this hateful, angry, bitter, mentally suffering man that is the suspect for the New York subway shooting that broke right. I saw it break right as I did the video yesterday. I'm now full of hate, anger, and bitterness. That is him. We now have some Facebook posts. We have YouTube videos that are still up to this day. One of the big things that it made me think about is I think it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have emotions. I think all emotions, from anger to sad to content, you can have laughter. The one thing that I am out on, because I listen to everyone from mainstream CNN, MSNBC, CBS, PB, not as much NPR. I used to listen to a lot of NPR, not as much. But I listen to that. Then I also listen to Nick Fuentes and Liza Schaefer and Tim Pool, of course. All those type of people. I listen to Vicki Dillard, Dr. Boyce Watkins. The one thing I'm out on when you start talking is violence. If you go down the road of talking about violence, I am out. I want no part with you. I want no association with you. You are a mental midget. Violence is a last resort in case of defense. The ultimate last resort. It should not be talked about until then. It's not something to romanticize. It's not something to dramatize. It's not something to brand yourself with. And those people like Nick Fuentes, for example, a lot of people ostracize him. He is not about violence. That's for damn sure. Frank James was, though. 62. He's named as the person of interest, if you haven't seen it yet, in the Tuesday attack on a Brooklyn subway train. The videos were haunting. We're looking at videos that are just extremely difficult to watch, in my opinion, almost like faces of death type of stuff. Very concerning. 23 people were injured. It's unbelievable how I believe no one died. I don't know how that was possible in such a small area. Statistically, I wonder what the odds were of that, thankfully. 10 with gunshot wounds after a man, as you know by now, opened fire before 8:30 a.m. on April 12th. So he posted this stuff on the internet, all these clips, and I want to go into why I say this is a state-sponsored racism. I'm not accusing anyone of causing him to do anything, but let me talk about what I feel is state-sponsored racism. Joe Biden, as we've talked about before, is very much big on this boogeyman of white supremacy. We talked about the warnings from all the alphabet agencies. The biggest threat to America is white supremacy. And of course, there's violence on all sides of the spectrum. Why are we just highlighting white supremacy? Almost like we're hiding other things. I don't get it. The pattern that we're seeing here, this is a tweet from Mazemore. Biden also thanked the FBI for their work on J6. The Russian bounty hoax investigating Charlottesville. They're still lying about that in regards to President Trump, trying to brand it in a way that is completely disingenuous and is a known lie at this point. That's how Joe Biden started his run for president, was on something that those who are in tune knew was a lie about this myth of good people on both sides, and that's not what Donald Trump, they're trying to portray it as something that it was not. Donald Trump has a lot of foibles, a lot of issues. That was not one of them. He started his whole campaign on the lie. Very fitting to see where we are now with stores rationing food. And then now his own son's laptop. And now we know that that's true. So he did not condemn. There was a lot of things that happened that could have been condemned that are not from white supremacists. Capitol police officer killed, another injured after a suspect rams car into police barrier outside building. Damn, that's a dark ass white supremacist. Don't they need to come clean now. Somebody needs to hold everyone accountable for their rhetoric. What we know about the attempted shooting of Louisville mayor candidate Craig Greenberg, another very tan white supremacist. And you know I have to bring this one up. Memory hold, the second after it happened, Waukesha, the county I never heard of, never knew how to pronounce. Darrell Brooks Jr., another dark-ass white supremacist. Are we going to update the domestic terrorist alert? I'm starting to see a pattern. And it's not just white supremacists. Are we going to update things? Are we going to acknowledge that, well, maybe we should just look at this? This is one of the rare areas that we are bipartisan on each extreme on, is terrorism. Nobody owns that. Is there a reason why it's not? Tucker Carlson got criticized a while back. Why he got criticized for this, I have no idea.
If you assume it's accurate, it would mean there are a total of 16, quote, white supremacist nationalist killings per year on average. For comparison, 774 people were murdered in the city of Chicago alone just last year. And very few of the perpetrators were white nationalists, we can tell you. Those trends hold up nationally. In 2019, there were 11,000 arrests nationwide for murder. Young black men made up a majority of those arrests, despite being about 6% of the overall population. So there's no credible way to argue that white supremacy is the most lethal threat that we face. That's not an argument, it's its own form of racial attack. But Joe Biden kept claiming it. White supremacy, he told us, is all around us.
In the comment, got a comment from Vic Creed here. So white people don't do anything bad. I need you to pay attention very closely, Vic. Nobody said that. I said it was bipartisan. It's not broken down by race. Why are we ignoring Waukesha? Why are we ignoring these other things? Why are we ignoring the violence that happens daily in the inner city? Is that not violence? Is that domestic terrorism? What's the definition of domestic terrorism? Little kids getting shot down in the street is not terrorism? It's enough of the games. This is life and death from the government agencies. They are losing all trust and all credibility. It needs to be updated. It needs to be discussed. That it's not, there is no race aspect of this that we need to highlight. It's terrorism, period. Domestic terrorism, period. They called or basically labeled parents, soccer moms, who aren't into critical theory, didn't want their kids to be masked, as terrorists. And yet there's nothing spoken about all this other stuff on the other side of the racial spectrum. People might think that's a good thing for these identitarians who are black. It's not. It's dangerous. It's going to get you killed. And be careful, because as soon as you outlive your usefulness, you will become the terrorist. So I hope you agree with the establishment talking point for the rest of your life, because the moment that you don't, you will become the terrorist. The moment you don't become useful, you will become the terrorist. White supremacy is everywhere, huh? That's what I should be afraid of, is the white supremacist. It's just them. They had to basically entrap people into a plot against Gretchen Whitmer that I just did a video on. They had to entrap these feckless, pathetic people online. So they went out of their way to entrap those people to fit a narrative during the election. And, you know, on the other side of things, it's not so quick to entrap or point out. I mean, this stuff was all over the internet. Andy knows that I looked into a social media, like the Waukesha suspect and the Louisville BLM activist who allegedly tried to assassinate a mayoral candidate. He appeared to be a fan of black nationalism. Is this okay? Now, when you look at these posts here, I'm not sure if any of these violate the First Amendment. So I'm not going to be making a case necessarily because, and the reason why I say that is I don't see a threat against someone specifically. So I don't think, so he said he did these things, for example, said they say the pen is mightier than the sword. I say the bullet is mightier than both of them. And he tweeted it twice or put it on Facebook twice. Yeah, that's someone who I'm unfollowing and staying away from. But is that a violation of the First Amendment? I don't think so. Now, if you put a name behind it, I think it is, because that's a specific threat. But I'm not a lawyer. I'm just giving you my case here. It's not a First Amendment case that I'm making. The case that I'm making is you can't post the wrong thing about Russia and Ukraine without getting banned. You can't post the right thing about Dr. Fauci without getting banned, but you can post this. State sponsored. It's just all out here, out in the open, still on YouTube, to my knowledge, at this moment. And to be clear, I think it should be on YouTube, unless there's something that I haven't watched all his videos, unless there's something that violates or is infringing on someone else's rights. The problem I have is the private companies have the relationship with the government, and the government's telling them what to filter out, what's not, and obviously they don't give a damn about this. Yet there's this video that came out. What was it called on Rumble? The water video. I forgot the title of it. I watched it yesterday, and it was about the pandemic and watch the water. I just had to look it up. Go to Rumble, search that, watch the water, watch it. I don't know anything. I'm not going to say one way about it or not. My point of bringing up this watch the water video is, why can't we have that discussion on a public forum? Yet this stuff, a black man with the American flag tied as a noose around his neck, is perfectly fine. You see why our founding fathers had this discussion about free speech and said, as long as you're not infringing on someone else's right, it should be free. One of the best sites. This podcast is still on YouTube, though. So to give YouTube credit, these sites have been posting about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and are now suspended. No problem with the other way. Antifa's all over Twitter. Antifa's all over Twitter doing the exact same thing that Frank James was doing. To this day, you can just go on Twitter, search Antifa, you'll find all kinds of innuendo of violence and we should do this and all that. All kinds of stuff on there all the time. That's why I found it funny when they took Parler down. And for a fact this stuff is all on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere. It's state sponsored. What the state is saying is this stuff will ignore, this stuff will highlight. And I guess it's because they think it benefits them. I'm going to end with this. I'm going to end with why I think this is the case. Obviously, just a theory. To me, it's a way to control people. I was listening to Hotep Jesus on with Legal Mindset, and he said something that really resonated with me. He's not the only person who said it, but he's the one that just brought it in my head, so I wanted to give credit to him. When we talk about socialism, all it is centralization. When you break it down to its core, like I like breaking things down to its core. When you break inflation down to its core, all it is increased money in circulation. It causes higher prices, but that's not what inflation is. Inflation is when you take money and you increase it in the circulation. That's what inflation is. So you break down socialism. Socialism, all it is centralized power. That's what it breaks down to. That's how socialism has existed in every society that's had it up to this point. Now, I know there's people who are socialists or communists that I have no beef with on the populist left who say, I want a new brand of socialism. Fine. That's perfectly fine. I'm talking about how it has existed and how it's being manipulated within our culture right now. There was a drag show that was done by a teacher in Wisconsin, and it led me to looking in more into this Middleton school district. And I looked into it more, and I saw that they had a base of critical theory in it, and they did a consortium where they're kind of teaching the teachers type of thing is what it looks like. I don't think it was directly with kids. I think it was a teach the teacher type of thing. And they're talking about intersectionality, social justice, all this type of thing. It's, they're paying a lot of money. These PhDs or these people who went to college and got degrees in African American studies, they need that loot. If they're going to do the bidding for their masters to bring this poison to our country, you're going to have to give me some paper for that. Like Patrice Cullors, I'm going to need a couple mansions for that. I'm going to need a couple book deals for that. And if you disagree with that, then let me see them do it without the deals. What philosophy are they fighting for without the deals? I don't see it. Show it to me and then I'll talk about it. So they pay them all this money, and here's one of the people that came through. Her name is Adrienne Marie Brown. And this is one of the people, and her session is openly described. I love when they're transparent. They tell you where they are. They don't hide any of this stuff. Her session was, or past session was, exploring collectivism. That definitely catches my eyes because collectivism is not a part of Western culture. So why are we exploring it? Like, you can historically, I've been in philosophy classes back in the 90s where we talked about these things. Like, this is what collectivism is. This is what utilitarianism is. But that's not what they're doing. They're saying we need to be collectivists. That's what they're saying. It's just like General Milley said, I want to understand white rage. No, bro, you don't want to just study white rage. You want to be a part of the religion that believes in white rage. That's why we're looking at you crazy. There's a difference there. I can study about Marxism and not be a practicing Marxist. They want to create practicing collectivists. And I'm going to tie this back into Frank James. I think it's related. The reason why I'm bringing up this video is I think she did an excellent job in explaining in a very concise manner what collectivism is. So I'm going to start this video, then skip to that part.
Organizing for what we want, building collaborative strategies, and learning better ways of relating to one another and the planet. Adrienne Marie Brown talked about all that and more when I met with her recently in Detroit. She's a social justice facilitator, a pleasure activist, and the author of Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change, Changing Worlds. She's also the co-editor of Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction from Social Justice Movements. Here's Adrienne Marie Brown.
Emergent strategies are ways of looking at the world, the natural world that we're a part of, and searching for collaborative efforts. Like, where does collaboration happen?
So instead of using the word collectivism, she uses collaboration. It sounds, they are so good at making their causes sound wonderful. Collaboration. Don't you want collaboration? Who doesn't want that? I want to collaborate with you out there. That's what we have the chat for. We're collaborating. It sounds wonderful. But let me fast forward to what that really means. She really described it well here, using ants as an analogy.
One of my favorite examples right now from the sort of the world of nature has been in this flooding that's been happening with the hurricanes, watching how ants have come together to survive. And they basically create a foundation of their own bodies, like a bottom layer of their own bodies, that then other ants climb on top of until they create this floating mound that then is able to make sure that the majority of them survive until they come across something that is a higher ground. Right now, we are drowning in the overwhelm of this political moment and the overwhelm of hard decisions. How do we reach out and hold on to each other, knowing that holding on to each other makes us a more stable body that can actually float and not pushing each other down, not pushing each other under. One of my favorite examples in the human world is actually the work of Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black Lives, and feeling like this.
It is. It's the movement for Black Lives. This is like a Teach the Teacher summit. Why the hell are we talking about Black Lives Matter in a school setting? Teach the teachers. type of, it's not, obviously this is not studying them as some historical group where you talk about the pros, the cons, the foibles, the good, the bad, the whole story. This is talking about how to be on board with them. One of the best parts why I like this ant analogy, listen to the part where she says, not all the ants will make it when you're doing this collectivism. When you go across the river, not all ants will make it. That's where I'm going to use to tie into Frank James and all these other things that are going on.
Survive, and they basically create a foundation of their own bodies, like a bottom layer of their own bodies, that then other ants climb on top of until they create this floating mound that then is able to make sure that the majority of them survive.
That was so smooth how she did that. Man, that was smooth. You know, you can present somebody, you can present it as we go on this collective journey to destroy Western culture, not everyone's going to make it. Same thing with the pandemic. They justified, hey, we know there's going to be some fallout, like deaths when you take an experimental drug. Not everyone's going to make it. We know that. But it's for the greater good. So smooth how she said that. Much respect, even though it's evil. Much respect. She was just like, yeah, make sure that most of them make it over through. What that means is that's why they justify, the ends justify the means. That's why they say, well, Black Lives Matter. We had all this damage, death, $2 billion of damage, all this negativity. We're not denouncing it. It's just part of that. Not everyone's going to make it. We indoctrinate children to be these social justice warriors. We don't talk about, when we talk about domestic terrorism, we're highlighting a certain faction. We're not highlighting the Tifa or this other, or if you have the skin color that we want to tacitly endorse, we're not highlighting that. They look at the Frank James stuff as not everybody's going to make it. This is a socialist concept. This is an Eastern philosophy concept. That's why when you look at people who are native, like from China, perfect example, they're used to saying yes. They're not used to pushing back. America's used to pushing back. You tell us to do this. Why? Nah. That's the Western culture. Individualism. So you tell me, I think I should hate the country because of the founding fathers, and many people had slaves, and when the Constitution was written, it didn't include slaves as full people. Well, I should hate the country now. Nah, we're not buying it. You know what? The parents who are standing up at the school board meetings showing concern, and some of them are black, but we don't really consider them black because socially they're not aligned with us. No, we don't buy that. In China, they got the social credit score and they have the culture regardless of that. Yes. That's why you see them able to lock everybody down into buildings. Not hard. The number of people in those apartment buildings far outweigh the authorities in Shanghai. You can only do that when you have a philosophy of collectivism. You need to stay in your room. You need to stay locked down. You need to do what we tell you because of the greater good of society. I don't care if you starve to death. That is the one ant at the bottom that didn't make it. Rest in peace. So they're using this whole, fake anti-racist stuff. That's why they're ignoring the Frank James type of stuff on Facebook. And that's why Biden could easily say there's domestic terrorists on all sides of all different colors. Isn't that what a common person, like a normal person would say, much less the president of the United States? There's troubling people of all walks of society, and we're looking to eliminate all of that to keep people safe. No, that's not, if you do that, that's not a way of controlling people. So you don't keep black people afraid of the white boogeyman. And you might get pushback if you say, yeah, there's white nationalists that are bad, because white nationalism by itself doesn't mean a bad thing. I'm a black nationalist. What does that mean? I'm America first. There are bad white nationalists. There are bad black nationalists. Not a hard concept. This is their way of controlling the populace. When you have a small majority of people at the top, how do you control the vast majority of people that don't even agree with you? You look back and you study where we are right now. The vast majority of people don't agree with this nonsense. How do you control them? It's through state-sponsored religions and groups. Has Biden ever spoken out against Antifa? He's spoken out against white nationalists. Has he ever spoken out against Antifa? I don't know. Maybe he has. I haven't heard it. And I definitely haven't heard it against black nationalism either. So let me know what you think. That's how I feel about this. It's dangerous. And what's happening in the school system is it would only lead towards creating people like this who are angry, confused, led astray, run amok, to use Malcolm X phrasing. They're led astray, run amok, and when you look at the ideology always goes towards fellow citizens. Like when I'm on this channel, very rarely do I look at fellow citizens and blame them or anything like that. I look at the people who we put in power first, like Joe Biden. And obviously it's not in any violence tip. It's a ideology. It's a, why did you say this and didn't say this?